From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Chris Illingsworth, who is a criminal profiler that has given us insights into what she believes happened. Her thinking is that she was probably killed and the incident has happened closer to Gorowa as opposed to back in Bargo. But because there are those missing 9 hours and there are no independent witnesses or any forensic evidence to show where Rachelle was killed, that's one of the biggest mysteries of this case. We don't know where she was killed, so we only know where she was found.
I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
This is part 2 of my chat with Kristy Charles, who's the sister of Rachelle Charles, a 23-year-old woman who was murdered in 2001, a murder which remains unsolved to this day. Along with investigative journalist Ashlea Hansen, who's been working with Kristy on a podcast called Dear Rachelle. In part 1, we got an overview of the murder. In part 2, we speak about some of the things uncovered whilst looking at Rachelle's murder, which I hope, like Kristy and Ashlea, will put pressure on people to ensure justice is finally done. Murders like Rachelle's should not go unsolved. Kristy, the podcast has been out for a little bit now. Mm-hmm. Are you happy with the impact that Dear Rachelle is having, the getting your sister's murder out into the public?
I couldn't be happier. It's bigger than I ever thought was possible, and the coverage has been incredible. The marketing team, the whole team Rachelle, the team behind Ash, and just the reach that it's getting and has gotten is incredible.
And that is what you hope to achieve with getting involved in a project like the podcast?
Yep, and it's fitting for her. She always used to say, go hard or go home. And so I think they've definitely done that.
Yeah, definitely. It's been. And what about you, Ashlea? It certainly had an impact. I've looked at all the media coverage of it, and people are literally asking me questions on the street about it. So it's got people's attention.
That's great to hear. I know when you're working on a story like this, it feels like you're carrying this secret for so long because of the sensitive nature of the investigation. You couldn't really tell that many friends or family because we were trying to keep it under wraps. And so when it was finally out there, it was a bit overwhelming, I've got to say, just to see it in print and everywhere and finally know it's out there. But I just mainly felt really proud and finally this is it. This is what we've been working for. Let's go. Yeah. So maybe more hard work starts now.
Getting the impact. And quite frankly, I think it puts pressure on the person responsible for this. And, I say to that person now, talking to you guys, I wouldn't like to be that person because there's one thing I'm very sure of, having worked homicide as long as I did. If an investigation gets a lot of media attention, there's a twofold benefit, the way I see it. That you get the public interested in it, public are interested, politicians are interested, and police properly resource the investigation. And if it's been sitting in a cardboard box or sitting in brief boxes on a desk somewhere, they tend to get open when there's some public interest in a case. So I'm sure the type of exposure that Dear Rachelle is getting across, the police will be looking at it. The other thing that's I think important, and Kristy, you might understand this, but it makes that Rachelle's life is not forgotten. And she's not forgotten. Here we are over 20 years down the track and we're still talking about the type of person she is. Does that help you? Yeah,
it's pretty empowering. I feel really good about it. I feel like, we're giving her a voice, and I think that that's really important because we've been quiet for so long. Mm. And, there's someone out there listening to this who's feeling very uncomfortable about all of this, and I think that that's incredible.
100%. I like to think the pressure that person's feeling, and there's no statute of limitations on murder investigations, and you hear about it all the time. The unsolved homicide locking people up 20 years, 30 years down the track, and it's not going to be forgotten. And I'm sure they don't like the fact that it's back in the attention of the media.
Yeah, I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about that? Just as your experience as a homicide detective for so long, what happens to a person when something like this drops? As someone that is guilty, that thinks that they've got away with murder, something so serious for so many years, and they think they're undetected.
Yeah.
What happens when it starts exploding in the media again? Have you ever seen that from behind the scenes?
I've seen it, and I've spoken to people that we've done that to. And I was going to say, if people are now listening to this podcast and Dear Rachelle podcast and all the interest in the media, have a look at the person that you might be watching or listening or talking about this, because the person responsible for this will act strange. Now, that person might, if it comes on TV or it comes up on radio or whatever, might want to disengage from the conversation, not talk about it, or they might talk about it incessantly. But whatever's going on, the person responsible with all this exposure is going to act a little bit strange. And people that are close to that person will look at the person and think, why are we getting a reaction from that person because we're talking about this crime? Because they will carry the guilt. That will sit with them, and they'll be thinking, well, I've got away with it, and now the pressure's on. So I think it creates a good opportunity for something to break. And then the public should, if it got suspicion about someone, just someone that's acting a little bit differently when all this talk is about Dear Rachelle, okay, pass that on to the police. And I point this out that if you know someone's committed an offence and you don't come forward, there's a strong likelihood that you're committing a serious offence too. And these cases don't get forgotten. You can see Kristy's here, and I've got a sense of you enough to know you're not going to forget this case. So the pressure's going to be on. There's a reward out there. There's a whole range of things. But if the public have got information, they need to come forward. There's no excuse not to come forward, and it could just be that little piece. But for the person responsible, I hope you're feeling pretty nervous at the moment. You should feel nervous at the moment, because at any time there could be a knock at the door and it could be the police, and there goes your life. You're locked away for the rest of your life. So, long answer to a short question, but I'm passionate about this. I think this is the type of pressure that should be applied to people. You should not be able to get away with murder. So...
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, 100%.
That's my little pitch, and let's hope the person is listening to it. And in answer further to your question, do the people involved in these crimes listen to the media? 100%. Seen it, and time and time again. And they could say, oh, no, I'm not interested. They'll be listening, and they'll be panicking, and they might make a stupid move. So this is the type of pressure that...
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
And should their family and friends be asking them questions? What should they do?
I think so. If I was sitting beside someone that I suspect of a murder, why are you reacting that way? What's triggering? Why don't you want to talk about this case? Or why do you overreact every time it gets mentioned? And it will get mentioned. Like the public are interested in it now, so it will get mentioned. So you don't have to front the person, but if you've got concerns, pass the information on to police, and it can be done discreetly too. It can be passed on so the person doesn't know where the information's coming from. There's so many different ways that this information can be passed on. So I get excited sitting down with people like yourselves that are doing something like this, like I did with Headley, because that is making a difference. That is the way these difficult crimes get solved, by putting the pressure on. So I'm a big believer in using the media, if we want to call podcast media, which it is a form of it now. We can use it in a positive way. So I think it's great. Like you could have gone on, it could have been an article in the paper or whatever, but it doesn't get that sort of involvement, that buy-in that the public get when they're listening to a podcast and listening to it unfold, and they're all coming up. Everyone thinks they're a detective, so everyone's coming up going, I think it's this person, that person, but it just creates that environment. And when it's all said and done, what are we doing it for? Is to get justice for Rachelle. And so if the pressure, have a look at the person that's acting strange and start to question why they're acting strange.
And what would you say, Gary, to someone that may be close to this person, either back then or now, that might feel afraid?
Well, there's protections that can be put in place, and I can understand the concerns and being afraid, but you could approach the police, in the strictest of confidence, and the information wouldn't get out and the protections would be put in place. So I do understand the fear that people might have in pointing the finger at someone or concerning, but there are measures that can be put in place to protect that person, so you don't need to be fearful, and it can be treated with the strictest of confidence. So anyway, Kristy, sorry, Ashlea and I are falling back into our old roles. Ashlea's been a journalist and I've been a cop. And we've completely lost track. Oh, that's right, this is a podcast. Okay, we'll get back to it. But yeah, I think they're important messages. So yeah. And there's so much that's been uncovered in the investigation that's been done on the podcast. What are the things that you guys think are interesting? And we haven't got time to go through the full details, but just a couple of things that have uncovered that excite you or have got you curious that have flowed out from what's been done on the podcast.
I think that the Walkinshaw and the significance of the Walkinshaw is incredibly important.
I'm really curious about the key pieces of evidence, and one of them, just for example, the tank.
Yeah.
And the reason, because so many experts, former detectives, have given us insights into the mind of a killer and the mind of someone who disposes of a body and what the process they go through. And so when we look at the tank, which was possibly the initial place where the killer had intended to hide Rachelle's body, but that didn't work out for one of many reasons, which may have been that the concrete lid was too heavy for one person potentially, or they couldn't slide it off for whatever reason, or there wasn't enough room in the tank to fit Rachelle. So they've resorted to the fire. So I'm interested to ask you if you think the significance of the tank, or if you think that the tank is significant, because when we went down there, that's when it really had an impact on me, thinking it's nighttime. You wouldn't be able to see the tank at nighttime, and what are the chances that someone would just stumble upon this tank? So the thinking is that somebody knew that the tank was there, so they had to have been familiar with the area. And you said that to me in one of our first interviews when we were down there as well. Yeah. Why are you so confident that the killer knew that area?
It's hard to find, and I remember we couldn't find it when we went down there, but it's cleared a lot more than it was back then. And because I used to go in there and sit in there, which some people find weird.
So it's a concrete tank in...
Yeah, it's an in-ground concrete tank.
Yeah.
So it had at the time a thick concrete lid.
Okay.
But that lid has now been replaced with a plastic lid, and the ground kind of covers it. So it's not obvious now, but at the time, from what I understand, you describe it because you've seen it, right?
Yeah, you had to duck in under a branch, and it wasn't a lot of room to be in there.
And it's a public bushland.
It's pretty close to the road.
It's a national park.
Yeah.
It's behind the tree line.
Yeah.
And you'd have to sort of duck in. And I didn't realise that you could get to it from the back. And I think that's what the killer did, that they have taken her behind and then
Is it on
forward.
The beach side of the road?
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's on the eastern side of Jiroa Road, or the Crooked River Road.
Right. Okay.
7 Mile Beach, Jiroa.
That runs all the way down. Okay.
The back road to Nowra.
Yeah. Yeah. I know the road. A couple of things, and we'll talk about the experts you've got working on the podcast. A couple of things that jump out to me with the circumstances surrounding, because quite often you can work out a lot by the manner and the way in which the victim's body has been disposed of. This, to me, doesn't look like a planned crime. It looks like a situation that's escalated. That's the sense I get of it. I'm also a starting point with when you're looking at why has a body been disposed in this location. I agree with what you touched on, where other people have said it's an area they're familiar with. Quite often when people are disposing bodies, they go there and dispose it because they're familiar with the area. If someone knew about the tank, a discrete tank, it would be a good place to locate the body. To me, it seems strange because we're talking 100 kilometres from from the location
Bargo to Giroa.
to Giroa, there's a risk associated with driving a car if you have someone that's a body in the car. So there's obvious the risk there. To go all that way out and then dispose of a body in the manner, to me, it strikes as panic. You've set the body alight. Well, there's more likelihood that someone's going to discover the body if you light a fire. You're destroying potentially forensic evidence. But there seems to be a panic about it. So it's someone that didn't plan it and it just escalated. I think it's a reasonable case theory that if it's right near the tank, that was the intended location. But and then the car. Is there any suggestion that Rachelle's car was used to convey?
Yeah.
Her there? What basis?
There were three separate sightings.
Four separate sightings. 4 people, 3 cars. So a couple in one car.
Yeah.
There were 4 witnesses had sighted a car similar to Rachelle's, if not one witness who knew his Holdens described basically Rachelle's car.
Yeah,
so
he pretty much said it was a VB Commodore, but it looked like a VH, which is exactly what it is because it's a VB Commodore, but it's got the VH lights and grille.
You're the expert here.
He described it
on the
incredibly
vehicles.
well. Yeah.
Okay, well that's interesting, isn't it? And that if her car was there taken to dispose of Rachelle's body there and then driven all the way back to hopefully just
the hotel,
all the way back there. Okay.
And the thinking is as well that perhaps they were already down there. So
and that's when it escalated.
Chris Illingsworth, who is a criminal profiler that has given us insights into what she believes happened, her thinking is that she was probably killed and the incident has happened closer to Giroa as opposed to back in Bargo. But because there are those missing 9 hours and there are no independent witnesses or any forensic evidence to show where Rachelle was killed, that's one of the biggest mysteries of this case. We don't know where she was killed, so we only know where she was found.
It's a reasonable, and I know Chris and she's very experienced, a reasonable assumption that it escalated down there because it's a long way to go to dispose of a body where...
Yeah, and the expanse of bushland between Bargo and Giroa.
So many other locations where a body could be disposed of. So, again, that sounds reasonable.
But then still wouldn't you still expect, though, that they go to a place, like Mick Ashwood says, that they're familiar with? So... Again, what takes this person to find that tank or to go looking for that tank? I think you're right, though, and I definitely do believe that it's more likely that the murder wasn't planned. Perhaps something else was planned. That's my feeling on it, that it's probably more likely that whoever took Rachelle that night, whoever met up with her, probably planned something... maybe some sort of sexual encounter and had hoped that it would be consensual. Or maybe they'd already planned to, something so sinister. Maybe they'd planned something sinister already, but it wasn't as bad as murder. I'm not really sure. We're never going to really know that, are we?
No, well, hopefully we will. Hopefully we will. But I suppose it's speculation if went there with an intent, but that intent didn't play out. 23-year-old girl like Rachelle, I'm thinking it's, is there a suggestion that it was sexually motivated, the crime?
Yes.
What brings people to that conclusion?
Well, she didn't have any clothes on from the waist down.
Right.
And, we've heard every detective that's worked on it said that they believe it was sexually motivated.
Yeah.
We don't have any evidence of rape or sexual assault, but that could be as a result of the fire.
What about the forensic examination of the car? Did that reveal anything? You've indicated in part one that your assessment, and I think it's a very sound assessment, that she wasn't the person that parked the car there.
Yeah, so the police have bits of the car. They have the steering wheel, they have a bit of carpet, they've got bits and pieces that they took off the car. But they weren't able to lift any DNA off any of that. The sheet that they found nearby, they believe that was used. However, that was contaminated by a police officer. So the DNA found on that was it was his.
Has there been a recent forensic review? Do you know if there's...
No, but I've asked for it.
Because that's, I know with old homicides that I've had, because of the improvements and the changes in forensic science, that a forensic review and go through all the exhibits that are still retained. And,
I've asked for it. They weren't keen on it.
Yeah. Who are you speaking to in regards to that?
That was Nigel Warren at Unsolved Homicide.
Right.
Yeah, and more recently Matthew Russell.
Right, and what was the rationale behind that?
Their arguments are, it's a strong argument. You can't, there's a finite amount of times that you can test something.
Yeah.
So it's not something that they routinely go back and test. If there's some reason for it, they will, but they won't just go back over everything.
Yeah, well, you're mentioning names, and it's difficult for me because I know both those people, and I respect both those people.
Yeah, and so do I.
And Nigel, I actually worked with him. I supervised him in his early days in homicide, and he's a very conscientious, good operator. So
yeah.
I think you've got a good person there. But I can understand your frustration.
Yeah, we had. When we were looking at the car, we were looking at the petrol cap, and we weren't convinced that was ever tested. I've asked Matthew Russell, and he can't find any evidence of if it was tested. He can't find what happened with it, so he's not sure whether it was or not. So he said he's put that in the hands of a squad near where I live.
Yep.
And they're going to come out and seize the petrol cap, and they are going to test it, which is great.
Well, I think to me, and I do listen to names, and you form your own views, but I think with Nigel and Matt, that's pointed in a good direction. That gives me...
And they've always been really willing to talk to me. I've had meetings with them, and they put up with me digging my heels in and having, telling them exactly what I think. They're very good. They're good towards me, they're fair.
They're both nice people too, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's
and Matt's a Holden fanatic as well. So
we won't hold that. I think Nigel is too.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's a bit of a rev head, so you'll be able to talk on that level.
Yeah. Right.
But these are the things. It's so hard for the family, and what I take away from that, the fact that they're talking to is such a positive situation, because it's when families get stonewalled. I think half the time that police might be working on the case, but they're not keeping the families informed, and that creates that pain. There was, in one of the episodes I heard on the podcast, that there was... I think he was the boss of homicide at the time, Scott Cook, talking about CCTV footage that was couldn't be found. What was that in relation to? We touched on it in part one.
Yeah,
briefly.
so they seized CCTV footage from petrol stations between Bargo and Nowra. And the reason for that is, one, if you're driving a V8 Commodore, it pass everything on the road except for a petrol station. And because an accelerant was used. Right. And because Rachelle was so broke, she would only put, $5-10 worth of fuel in the car at a time because she's never had any money. Yeah. So if her car was used and it travelled 100 kilometres each way, they would have needed to put fuel in it. Right. So that's why there's a tension on the fuel cap, because the fuel cap is one of those key-locked silver caps behind like a flap that you can open with your hand. But there's no fingerprint dust or anything on the cap, so that's why we questioned. We had Chris Darcy from Search Dogs looking at it, and he questioned whether that had ever been tested, and I thought that's a really good question.
Well, it makes sense if they're coming back and need petrol, the person driving the car back. But the CCTV footage, I've had a lot of success with investigations getting that at service stations where people are up to no good heading along the highways. So
Yeah.
is there any hope that might be found?
They lost it really early on, and I think Christian Olivares and his team went right through wherever it was supposedly stored, and they couldn't find it either at the time of the inquest.
Yeah.
So they have had a lot of people looking for it.
Yeah.
There are 2 segments of CCTV that, according to the brief that we have, is still in police possession. So Kristy has asked Unsolved if they'll let her look at it, at least just Kristy, just so that she could rule it in or out, because there is a woman on one of the segments of CCTV within close proximity of where Rachelle's body was found, but also just a few hours before she was found. So there's one piece of CCTV that has a woman and an unknown man. Well, both of them are unknown, so it's a woman and a man. And then the second piece of CCTV was about an hour later, I think, and that had just 2 men on it and a Commodore. But the number plate was obscured because of they had the lights on and they didn't turn the lights off when they filled up.
Right.
So my feeling on that was that intentional? Did they leave the lights on by mistake, or was that a deliberate attempt to disguise the number plate and obscure the number plate?
Yeah.
So that's why Kristy wants to see that CCTV as well.
Is there a suggestion that the female could have been Rachelle? Is there, or we just don't know?
We just don't know. So at the very least, you would think that Kristy would have been shown that CCTV to say, absolutely, that is not her, or who is this person? Because even though it's almost 24 years old, I still think that even if it is just black and white, a family member could make out someone if they're identifiable.
And same with the car. I see
same with the car.
Day, so I'll know if it's the car.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's our question to police is, why has Kristy never been shown this CCTV if it does exist? Because according to the brief, that was not the CCTV that was lost. The other CCTV was lost.
Okay.
So there is some, but you've never seen it.
No, and I've asked to see, and I can't remember what the response was. The other CCTV footage that they've got is from the Bargo train station.
Yeah.
And apparently that's very grainy and very hard to make anything out. Matt Russell said that. He said it's really hard to...
Yeah, well, it's
too far away.
Certainly improve the CCTV type coverage that you get in this day and age, but the old ones are hard. But the fact that the car was where it was parked, someone who parked it had to leave that location too. But I would imagine that that footage was grabbed very early in the investigation, because otherwise we probably wouldn't have copies of it, because it gets disposed of sometimes. To put your mind at ease, I know there was a lot of times, and it doesn't really put your mind at ease, but knowing that these mistakes shouldn't happen down the track, not that the impacts on this investigation, but the practices are a lot better now on where exhibits are stored. It used to be, I won't say ad hoc, there was a system in place, but it was a system that failed too often, and the exhibits were misplaced. And you think, well, how can you lose an exhibit to a murder investigation? But police stations, someone retires, a box is left there, it gets moved, someone comes in, and it's happened too often. But now they've got a system in place that should not happen down the track. With the podcast, you've got some expert opinion on the situation, or people that were involved in the investigation. Can we talk through a couple of them? You mentioned Chris Illingsworth. What did you run past her? What type of things were you looking at Chris to provide?
Well, Chris was involved in profiling Rachelle's killer.
Yep.
So she has intimate knowledge about the case. She examined a lot of the evidence and wrote a report to the New South Wales Police Force about the behaviour, the type of, and profiled the killer. Yep. So for that reason, she was someone that I really wanted to speak to, and she was willing to, because she believes, like most retired police officers, that getting that information out there could help and could take this case that little bit further. And she also believes in a podcast too. So she was on board and she wanted to help the family and was very generous with her time and went back over her memory of the case, and also met us down at Gorowa and gave us some really fascinating insights into what she believed happened. Fascinating, but also traumatic for Kristy to hear, and that was a really difficult conversation to have to relay to her what Chris had relayed to us. So, but, you know, in true Kristy style, she just takes it and just processes it and says, I want it out there. You know, this is what he did to her.
Yeah.
And it's part of the evidence, and it could help us.
The cause of death, what was put down as the cause of death?
It was unknown, but either strangulation or suffocation.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Damien Loon, and the people that would have heard that name from here, and he's been a guest on this, but he was also the detective involved in the teacher's pet thing, like a dog with a bone when he's on a case. So you consulted with him, so that's a good choice. What did Damien bring to the podcast?
Well, I shared the brief of evidence with him and asked him if he wanted to get on board because I needed help and I wanted someone who could independently help me pull out the key pieces of evidence that we wanted to use in the podcast. And for obvious reasons, his profile with the teacher's pet, he was also retired, and I thought he might have the time because it is really hard to get people to commit to such a big project. But when I reached out to him, he said, yes, absolutely. And then he tells a different story that I just fronted him at the airport basically with a brief of evidence, and he did agree to meet me though. And he started reading the case, and then we just had regular contact, and I surprised Kristy with having him on board and Anne, and which was really nice just because they have felt forgotten for so many years. Yeah. So to bring someone with a profile like that to the case, I just thought it was, it just shows that there are still many people that are interested in Rachelle's case and getting justice for her and your family. So I just thought he'd be a great person to bring on board, and his knowledge and his analysis of the case. And he's just a straight shooter as well. Yeah. He's great for a podcast. He's got a great voice. He just gets straight to the point and tells it like it is. He
doesn't care about ruffling feathers, which is a good trait to have when you're involved in that type of stuff. Kristy, you would have been happy for him to come on board?
Yeah, he's really cool.
You need those cranky, crazy human beings to sometimes push it along, don't you?
That's right. I relate to that side of him really well. Yeah. He's, and we agree on a lot of things when it comes to the case. Yep. And just having his insight was incredible. And he's just so giving with his time. And he's just such a good guy.
Yeah, and it must, you've carried this for so long, and having a team of good people, committed people, must give you some contentment knowing that people are looking at it.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. Mick Ashwood, okay. Mick took, and off mic we were discussing it because I know Mick well, and we worked together in homicide, and I was thinking he might have reviewed it in unsolved homicide. When you said, I think, Kristy, that Mick Ashwood became involved 12 months after Ivor was running the investigation. I think Mick would have been on the floor, as in one of the working teams at that point in time, and I think the processes that we had in place there, that if an investigation like this one had got to a certain point, homicide would come down and act as a consultant or take it over. So I think that was the capacity. I thought it might have been unsolved, but he probably was on the floor given the time frame.
Oh, yeah, that's likely. As I said, my memory of that's shaky.
And how have you found Mick Ashwood's input? He's out of the cops now, so he's not. He doesn't have to do the corporate spin. How is Mick coming?
I haven't spoken to Mick. Yep. I've spoken to a couple of others, but Ash has spoken to Mick a few times.
Yeah. How'd you find Mick?
He's incredible, and again, his insights and his expertise on looking at the case and pointing me in the right direction as to what I should focus on and why he thinks it's important. And just, again, his time is always available when I ring him up because I've got a query about something, and he just has intimate knowledge of the case and what he believes may have happened, and and who we should be focusing on as well. He has some insights about that.
Yep.
So from my perspective as a journalist, great, so happy to have him on board.
Well, you're putting together a good team and all the different skill sets and expertise that you've brought together. The inquest, when the inquest was finalised, what did the coroner come back with? What finding?
Persons unknown.
Yeah.
Manner unknown.
How did that make you feel?
I wasn't surprised by that point.
Yeah. Did you go to the inquest with expectations that this would be the breakthrough?
I was hopeful, but, we'd been, not let down by anyone in particular. We've been let down a lot over the years, so we were hopeful but not confident.
Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong here, we'll probably have to delete this, but I think I read in the media that there were 9 persons of interest identified at the inquest, that 2 were not required to give evidence. I think 2, or it might have been more, were not required to give evidence because the coroner thought it's not going to take the matter any further. The others got in. Some, in the evidence that they provided, it was clear that they had alibis or it was exculpatory. There was 1 person of interest that couldn't be eliminated. Are we touching on dangerous grounds here, or is that where we're?
I think that's where we're up to.
Okay, and that person, and my understanding, was someone that Rachelle worked with.
Yeah.
We want to talk about that.
Yes.
Yeah, he was her boss.
Yep.
His name is Kevin Relle.
Yep.
Formerly Kevin Cornwall. Changed his name in the 80s. Am I allowed to say that?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he sort of took her under his wing and showed her the ropes of selling used cars, and he was the one that allowed her to take cars home. They had a really good relationship. It was a bit of a mentor-mentee relationship from Rachelle's perspective.
Yep.
She really looked up to him, and they got along really well. But she got along with everyone though.
She was 23. How old was he?
He would have been in his 40s.
Yeah, early 40s, maybe 43 from memory. He was born in 56.
Yeah,
so in 2001, I'm not very good at maths.
I'll let you two do 45. The calculations.
So he was about 45.
It'd be really embarrassing if I got that wrong. School teacher cannot subtract.
Okay, so he was her boss, and does that bring it back to the car that she was excited about on the day? I forget what's the walkie-talkie, or what's it
walkie.
Called? Walkie?
Not the talkie.
Well, no, not well. Sorry, no walkie-talkie. Okay, walkie. You think that was he had said that she could have that car that weekend? Okay. Yes. And this was all heard at the inquest?
It was.
Did I, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the part of the podcast I listened to that one of Rachelle's friends said that she couldn't talk in front of him about going out on a girls' weekend?
Yeah, she didn't want to annoy him or...
secretive about her private life.
Yeah.
And Damien Loon has some insights about that. He says, well, that's a red flag, because why would a 23-year-old woman be so afraid to share her personal life with someone that she trusted and someone that she worked with? So there's another person that works there as well, Fiona, her friend, and she gives insights as well about that time in Rachelle's life and her relationship with her, and she just sort of calls it out that it was a little bit odd, bit strange.
That he wanted to know about her.
He was very obsessed with her life and knowing about her personal life, but then at the same time wasn't was this particular trip to Queensland. he wasn't happy about that, and she was going to meet a young man in Queensland that she'd met over the internet.
Yeah.
And the internet was only just emerging in 2001.
Days,
So it was a bit of a new thing. So Fiona and her went to Queensland on this girls' trip, but it didn't go down well with Kevin. And Fiona, and the feelings around that are that he possibly fancied her and he had a bit of a thing for her. He played favourites with her, gave her lots of benefits in terms of cars and her access to the cars. That's how you describe it.
I remember her telling me, Kevin used to be a detective. That was the sort of the stories that he would tell her, and he wasn't a detective. It was
Walter Mitty.
Yeah, he was talking himself up to this young pretty girl, and she believed him because she respected him.
Someone, a 23-year-old girl working in an environment, you shouldn't be concerned about what her personal life is, and that is a concern.
Yeah, and there were reports from his girlfriend at the time that he would make comments about Rachelle, and he'd be disappointed in her behaviour, like her personal behaviour and things that were uncharacteristic of a boss.
And this all came out at the inquest?
Yes. He made comments about her wearing makeup, described her as a tart on one occasion, so spoke really negatively about her, and there was almost like this marked shift in his behaviour and his thoughts and feelings towards her.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder, as a journalist, did she reject him? Was there any kind of, suggestion that he wanted more from her and she rejected him, and maybe then that has escalated over time?
Well, these are all the questions ideally that would be asked and answered at the inquest. Was he called to give evidence at the inquest?
Yeah.
And how did that play out?
He did give evidence at the inquest, but there were many questions he didn't answer because he executed his right to silence, or executed his right to refuse to answer questions on the grounds that it may incriminate him, which is his legal right, and he was legally represented at the inquest. And so there was a lot of legal arguments about what was asked of him, what he was prepared to answer.
You're quite right. That is his legal right, that he doesn't have to answer a question on the grounds it may incriminate him. And I've seen people time and time again get in the witness box and take that protection. Sometimes it's for something that's not related to what the inquest is about. Sometimes it could be they were smoking a joint that night. That could have been the case because there were other issues happening at Camden Holden at the time. So it could have been. That could be the reason why he didn't want to incriminate himself. Okay. I always look opportunity, motive, capability, and opportunity falls in the factor of alibi evidence. Was there any alibi evidence that he presented that I was at home or I was interstate on the day she disappeared? Was any alibi evidence presented? Yes, but it was, no one saw him. Right.
So he presented
He didn't actually see anyone in his alibi, so there was no one to corroborate what he was saying.
Yeah.
He presented a very involved alibi that involved going shopping, going to a service station, going to a pub briefly, going to a takeaway food store, even mentioned going to his girlfriend's house, but she wasn't home. Then at one stage he's even said that he's driven past Camden Holden. At one stage he said he's driven past Camden Holden and has seen the cleaner and has had a really brief conversation with the cleaner. And all the people that he came into contact with that night that he says, police can't verify it. And the cleaner even gave evidence at the inquest and said, I have no memory of anyone pulling me up that night. And he was interviewed pretty soon after Kevin was interviewed about his movements on the 7th of June 2001. So his alibi can't be proven and it can't be disproven. So that's always been the difficulty about this investigation as well, because there were so many persons of interest and so many people in her Rachelle's life that had to be looked at.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they didn't manage to prove or disprove Kevin's alibi. So
Yes.
we don't know whether
So
that's what he did that night.
left hanging. I think I should point out at this stage that Kevin Relle has strenuously denied any involvement in the murder of Rachelle Childs,
Yes, that's true.
and he's consistently maintained that position.
He has, and he's always cooperated with police as well, and has volunteered his time to participate in interviews with detectives about Rachelle's murder, and he's always denied any involvement.
There was a couple of other lines of inquiry. There was someone that Rachelle saw the night before, and his petrol can was found in the.
Oh, that's the next door neighbour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did clear him, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've had the inquest, and what year was that in again?
2008. That wrapped up.
2008, the findings were handed down.
All right. So, you're the family. There's been an investigation. You've got no result. There's been a change of teams running the investigation. It's gone to inquest. Looks like it's been prepared, and the police have done their best. Coroner hands down their findings, and still none the wiser.
Yep.
What's the next time you were contacted by police, or what's the next thing? Because if we're talking 2008, this is a long time ago.
They doubled the reward in 2011.
Okay.
From 100,000 to 200,000.
Was that your initiation, or?
No, I can't
Right.
remember why they did that.
Yeah.
And then nothing.
So,
Probably difficult as well, just to be fair, because, as you say, your dad was the main
point of contact.
point of contact. So
Yeah, there could have been.
there could have been. It's
Contacted
hard to
by
say
one
whether
hour.
there was, unless, because I know that you say that you don't have a good memory of it, so it's sort of
Yeah.
hard to say whether or not Graham was speaking to, how often Graham was speaking to police, and what was happening between their correspondence.
He did keep in touch with Christian Olivares.
Yeah, he would have been unsolved homicide,
Yeah.
Christian. Yeah.
But nothing substantial happened.
Right. Okay, so looking at it this way,
But that was 2011 when that reward was
increase.
We're in 2025 and it's still at $200,000, which isn't a huge amount of money if it's going to change somebody's life to come forward with critical information.
No, and rewards don't get paid a lot of times. I think, and quite often families would come to me because I was involved in the first $1 million reward with William Tyrrell, and that was after a discussion with a politician, and then the $1 million reward came out, and then I got not inundated, but contacted by other families saying, well, why is that case worth $1 million and why is ours $150,000 and that?
It's a good question.
I think there could be. Rewards are a tactical thing. You've got to use them at the right time for the right reason. But when we're looking at $200,000, it's not life changing now. But $1 million, perhaps, that might push someone to come forward that if they did know the person that was going to change their life or their life was going to be disrupted, that might motivate them. But the point I'm trying to get to here is 2008 inquest. Okay, well, we got no answers. 2011, okay, the reward has been increased. That's good. There's a bit of attention. We're now 2025. We're talking about this, and I'm sure the police are looking at this because of the podcast. What do you think would have happened if you didn't do the podcast?
Can't swear, but nothing. I contacted the police unsolved in 2021.
Yeah.
And I was emailing a man named Stuart at the time.
Yep.
And he said that they were assessing Rachelle's case to see if they'll do a review. And so I gave him, he said, give me a month. I gave him 3 months and emailed him, and I just never heard back from him. Well, then when I spoke to Nigel Warren last year, he said, well, at that point in time, Stuart actually retired.
Yeah.
So then I said, okay, well, what happened with it? And he said, well, we can't find an assessment. we don't know what happened
Right.
there. So I said to him, "Are you telling me that I was lied to?" And he said, "No, I can't. I don't know if you were lied to or not." He said, "I don't think so." So I said, "Okay, well, when's the next assessment of her case?" And he said, "Oh, it'll be this year," which was last year. And then when I spoke to Matthew Russell, they were focusing their efforts on older cases at the time. So they weren't actually doing an assessment of Rachelle's case. And they said, and I said, "So don't hold my breath." And he said, "No, don't hold your breath."
Right.
So, but then now they are. So
Miracle.
squeaky wheel.
It is a squeaky wheel. But
I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that they're doing that. And I'm not, I know I sound critical, but I know that they've only got, as I said, a finite number of resources, and they've got to make those decisions, which are really hard.
Yeah.
And I'm the family, so I obviously want it for Rachelle, but there's 800 unsolved cases.
Yeah, I know, but also you have the right to ask, and I'm confident for you, and I'm saying this, I'm looking you in the eye here, that the fact that you got Nigel, you're talking to Nigel, he wouldn't bullshit to you. Like, I say it up front. I know the way he operates, and I know the person he is, so it's a good person looking at it. I think it's sad that you need to be that squeaky wheel to get people to look at it. People put faith in the fact that their brief is an unsolved homicide, and for years I cringed when I heard coroners say, "Look, we don't know what's happened, but rest assured we're referring this matter to unsolved homicide." And there's been a lot of coverage in the media about the failings of the unsolved homicide, where cases weren't being reviewed and cases weren't being followed up. So, yeah, you're doing all that you can to get attention on your sister's murder.
Well, I think it's a reflection of how under-resourced they are too.
Yeah,
you can't expect them to work miracles.
No.
Yeah.
But it's someone's life's been taken. You expect things to be done properly.
Yeah.
And where to from now?
We need people to come forward. We're hoping that, as Damien Loon has said in his interviews, we're hoping that the relationships that existed back then that may have prevented people from coming forward now don't exist.
Yeah.
And now that people are, have another 20 years on them, and they're more mature and they understand the gravity of keeping silent, and that they'll come forward. And we want them to know that we're not going to whack you with a stick for not coming forward earlier. We're going to welcome you with open arms, and we want you to come and talk to us. That's
a good message to put out.
Yeah.
And I think quite reasonable. Just congratulations on the podcast, and I've enjoyed the listen. It really takes you deep inside what happened. If people want to listen to the podcast, how do they listen to Dear Rachelle?
Well, they can go to the website www.dearrachelle.com.au, and if you subscribe to News Corp Australia mastheads, you get early access to episodes. So we encourage people to do that if they want to listen. And you can follow all the news and the breaking news through that website, and also through your News Corp mastheads.
I wish you guys all the best in getting a result to this for this. It deserves a result. And my instinct from a homicide detective's point of view, it is solvable. It's definitely solvable. So hopefully this, the podcast you're doing, the attention you're getting, it will encourage people to come forward.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.